فهمنا سليمان وكلنا آتينا حكما وعلما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك لما وحنانيك أنا لا تنسني ولا تنسني الحمد لله أفضل الحمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وسائر النبيين والصالحين وسلم أن موفقني واهدني وسددني واجمع لي بين الصواب والثواب وعذني من الخطأ والهرمان آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome to you all. Today's lecture is a one-off stand-alone lecture. As I glanced on those students joining and giving salam, I saw some familiar faces, familiar names rather, going to some of those who are attending the End of the World course, and also some of those who are attending the Tahara and Salah. But the End of the World course is somewhat relevant because the subject matter of today's discussion is going to be on what we consider to be one of the major signs of the end of the world. About a week or so ago, just to give you a little bit of a background to this, about a week or so ago, Mufti Abrar and I had a conversation. Mufti Abrar is a senior scholar within Balagh, and he and I had a conversation. He raised his concerns, and his concerns were that there are individuals who try to argue from an academic background and an academic stance in order to argue the case that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam will not return to the earth. And if they don't argue necessarily from an academic basis for the denial of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam to descend from the heavens, they cause doubt. Okay, they cause doubt. They try to cause confusion, and they at least put the seeds of doubt into the minds of the person and the people in order for them to be uncertain now about whether Isa alayhi salatu wasalam is going to descend from the heavens. So that's going to be our subject matter for today, inshallah. Now, those of you who have obviously been in Dars with me before know that I'm quite easy and flexible when it comes to putting questions out. So I have no concerns in you putting your questions out onto the question part. There's a separate Q&A. I do, however, say that please don't raise hands or don't switch on your audio or your videos because I'm easily put off, easily disturbed, and I don't want to necessarily lose my train of thought. I will obviously glance at your questions as and when that I'm going through. However, what I will say is that if I feel I'm going to answer that question later, then I will wait and I will pick that question up in the appropriate place. So I'm not ignoring you as such, maybe ignoring you a little bit, but not ignoring you absolutely, because that question may be more relevant later on down the road. And sometimes we have a habit of asking questions even before the teacher has had a chance to explain. So with those rules set, let's go into sharing my screen with you. I've been told the Balagh students really like PowerPoint. So here we go. You're going to get a PowerPoint, inshallah. So let me start that off. Now, as I understand it, you should be able to now see my PowerPoint, and there should be no problems there. This is a very important topic, brothers and sisters, not just because of the specific topic, but also because of the principles behind it. You're going to find, and you already will be finding, that there are different philosophies and different hermeneutics. Don't worry, we will cover those words and what they mean shortly, which are pushing for a reinterpretation or another understanding of what has become something which has literally become factual over time. And I think this was one of the reasons why Mufti Abrar Sahab raised this particular point, because the method of argumentation and the method of reasoning is as much a concern as the subject matter itself. So anyway, with that introduction behind us, I will give you the broad structure of today's lecture. The first section is going to be focusing in particular upon the doubts. As I said to you, the style or the methodology of argumentation is to raise doubts and bring uncertainty on matters in which there has been certainty throughout the duration of the Muslim legacy. So the first thing I'm going to tackle and discuss is the doubts. And those of you who know my lecturing, I like alliterations. I like playing with words. It just keeps the interest levels up. So the first section is going to be looking at doubts disseminated. And then we're going to move on to the doubters' methodology. This is important because what we're going to try to do is unpack what methods are they using. And the reason why I think this is important is because once we start to understand the principles which are at play, then maybe we might see those principles at play in other matters and be quick to spot them. So that's as important. We then look at the doubters' motivations. What is the cause for this doubt being brought about? And why is this coming about? What's the rationale for it? What's the basis for it? Okay. Every now and then, obviously, I click on the questions just to see. Oops, I've just jumped one. No, I can't get rid of the questions. There you go. So then we're going to go, once we've established what the doubts are, what the methodology is, what the motivation is behind it, we're then going to look at dismissing the doubters' methodology. If we dismiss the infrastructure, if we dismiss the basis from, or the tree from which the fruit of doubts are being produced, then by essence and by extension, we eliminate the doubt itself. Then we're going to explore what the prophetic methodology is. From that, we're going to see what was the Prophet ﷺ's way in when we were trying to look at things and understand things. Finally, we're going to look at what is certainty. How do we establish certainty? We can look at, for instance, establishing certainty by our senses. How certain can our senses be? We know that there's things like illusions, and we know that the sleight of hand by magicians or people who try to fool and trick us can easily deceive the eyes. We know, for example, a mirage. We can see a mirage and our eyes will tell us that there's water or something there. So that shows that we have one means of determining certainty. Well, is that something which is what we call absolute certain? Primary sources, we're going to explore what we mean by primary sources, and then we're going to explore secondary sources, and finally we're just going to finish off a conversation on what do other faiths. So that's the broad structure. So as I said, I'm seeing some of the questions which aren't necessarily relevant to the topic. This is also an adab of how we raise questions. So when we know that this particular subject matter is on this, and we know where that content is going to come, then we need the necessary adab to pose the question in its due place. If it's not to do with this lecture, then we need to attend another lecture as well in the future. So let's look at the doubts first. So who is disseminating these doubts? Where are they coming from? It's important that when we look at a particular position, we also look at where that position is being espoused from. This is important. When you are doing usulul hadith and when you are learning about training to become a muhaddith, then not only are you looking at the words which are being uttered and the news which is being shared with you and the khabar which is reaching you, but you're also looking at the quality, and you are evaluating and measuring the person from whom that has come. So there's two aspects. And again, just taking that analogy of the science of hadith, we have what's called the isnad and we have what's called the matan. And that together becomes the hadith. I know we have a habit of saying hadith and we just make reference to the matan, but the hadith is not just specific to the matan itself. The hadith is the isnad, the chain of narrators, and the matan, the statement, the observation, whatever it might be, and combined, they become a hadith. Okay. So therefore, before we start to look at what is being said, we need to see who is saying this, because that's important. So when we look at who is disseminating these doubts, who are raising these doubts that there is a, is Isa alayhi salam going to, that title that is being used is provocative. There was a reason to use that title. And also some of the material that was used in terms of the imagery was to be provocative, apart from obviously my face, that there was no provocation in that. There was to be provocative in order to make people think, in order to make people try to understand this. So when we look, we see that this statement is particularly coming from extreme sects as we describe them. Now, when we mean by extreme, we're talking about the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is being what we call within the boundaries of definition of Islam. And then we have those which are either on the absolute edges of this or even potentially outside of that. Now, obviously, this is not going to be too much discussion about takfir and making takfir of groups, because I'm going to avoid that. And also I'm going to avoid making takfir of individuals. So that's important that we set that out straight away. In essence, we're going to look at statements and whether those statements are statements of kufr. So we have the views of the extreme sects, the Khawarij, the Mu'tazila, and obviously I don't have time to go into great detail as to who these groups were. The Mu'tazila were more rationalist. They tried to bridge the gap between reason and revelation, and this really came about when Greek philosophy made its way into Islam. And then we had the responses from the Mutakallimun. But again, as I said, that's outside the remit of today's lecture. And we're seeing a few modernist scholars and modernist groups like the Ahmadiyya. And I'm sure I'm not going to name names, but those of you from the Indian subcontinent particularly will know certain individuals who are espousing these particular views and giving them out. But what's important, my dear brothers and sisters, is that this is posited as a valid opinion. It is given as though it has equal weighting with any other opinion. And that's the danger of the methodology, which I'm going to explore. So why is it doing this? Well, it's establishing plausibility. This is what it's trying to do. It's establishing plausibility that, okay, if you're going to say that Isa alayhi salam is going to descend near the end of time, then it's as plausible that Isa alayhi salam is not going to descend near the end of time. This is the methodology. So it becomes a consideration of equal groups, even though it is nothing like that whatsoever. You're seeing a small handful of individuals or groups that have raised this doubt. But the way it's being portrayed by certain contemporary individuals, is as though this is an equal opinion on equal footing to the other opinion. What we see is, and this is more the principles, is a so-called rational and liberal academic argument of being unbiased and fair. Unfortunately, we swallow this because we are given the impression that traditional trained scholars lack academic rigor. Okay, they lack the ability to academically argue something. But I think that's a dangerous issue, because academia as it is currently is based on a completely different philosophy than what Islamic sciences are. So the impression that is being given is that it's unbiased and fair. It reminds me of a story when I was doing my fiqh al-aqalliyat thesis. I remember having a conversation with a professor at the university. And when I was doing a particular piece, the university professor said to me, he said, Amjad, how are you going to make sure that you remain unbiased? I says, what do you mean by that? He says, well, you're a practitioner, you are a Muslim scholar. So you're naturally going to be biased in trying to prove that Islam has all the answers. So I paused and I smiled and I said to him, I said, you work within the Islamic sciences, don't you? He said, yes. And I said, you're an atheist. He said, yes. So I said, how do you ensure that you are unbiased? Because you don't believe anything that comes from Islamic sources. So he went quiet. And afterwards he laughed. He says, you know what? I've never ever thought of it like that. So the argument that's always given is that liberal rationalism is unbiased and fair. And therefore, if we start to reassess Islamic positions through this rational liberal lens, then that is unbiased and fair. Okay, but it's very dangerous. It pushes this Cartesian doubt, okay, skepticism, that doubt everything. So Descartes' method of doubting became the root of the modern scientific method. And what it's supposed to do is it brings about new insights and critical thinking. Now, sometimes we find these words very attractive. Oh, new insights, critical thinking. This can only be a good thing. Yes, but what we fail to realize is, do we really need new insights on positions of Aqidah which have been established for 1400 years? Do we really want that? In essence, are we saying something which has already been established, why are we challenging that? Now, we might from a fiqh basis, yani a position of fiqh, as our methodology of science develops, as our technological advances develop, we may look at medicinal matters, we may look at financial matters, we may even look at political matters and say, look, we understand the world slightly differently now. Let's reassess that. That's a different thing altogether. Remember, we are looking at a position of Aqidah. And this is why it's very, so this is the methodology that's being espoused. Another key point is that we have within our Sharia philosophy the appeal to authority. So when we say Imam Abu Hanifa said, then we go quiet. When we says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we go quiet. When it says Qala Rasulullah, we go quiet. So that shows that ingrained within our philosophy is this appeal to authority. Okay, as soon as we hear Mufti Falah said this, as soon as we hear Shaykh Falah said this, then we naturally are careful not to say something, because we understand that there is within our philosophy this appeal to authority. However, in the philosophy of liberal, rational, so-called academic understanding, this appeal to authority is a fallacy. Okay, it is a fallacy, and therefore it cannot be accepted as an argument. So therefore it eradicates a lot of the basis of our arguments when we say, but it says it in the Quran, but it says it in Hadith, but it says, you know, Imam Fulah said this. So as soon as we use these words, the so-called scholar, I'll use that word, who is leaning towards this academic philosophical understanding, which is at the root of it is this Cartesian doubt, would say, that's appeal to authority. You can't use that argument. Okay. So just want to sort of make that point. I'm just at the same time, what time does this talk finish? What, you bored already, Nafisa? I've just started. It's supposed to finish at 3:30, inshallah, but let's see. So these are important points. I hope that, you know, these have been registered within your minds. I know, mashallah, a lot of you students make notes. So, you know, it's a good time to be making notes. Not that I'm instructing you that there's going to be an exam or anything, but I would suggest capturing these thoughts, because when we now start to analyze and assess what is going to come, you need to understand the basis of the doubts which are being disseminated. Is absolutely important for that. MashaAllah, Jazakumullah khair, Zakiya. Yep, that's fine. Al-Balagh admin are reading these messages, so they will be taking all your comments into consideration. Barakallahu feekum. So let's move on. This is the key thing here now. If you've been asleep up until now, now's the time to wake up. It's the application of a foreign philosophy. When we use these fancy words, academic approach, okay, oh, it's more scientific, oh, we're doing critical thinking, oh, it's new insights, and it sounds really funky, and it sounds really cool, and it sounds like you're on the cutting edge, and you're really intelligent, and you're really clever, and, you know, it gives that impression. However, as I've tried to demonstrate in this slide alone, we can clearly see that a lot that's within this academic methodology, and I use the word academic because it's the current method of academia. It doesn't necessarily mean academia was always like that. If we go back a few hundred years, we find out that most of the scientists and academics were people of religion, whether they were Christians, whether they were Muslims, they had a religious argumentation or a religious philosophy to their science. And now, obviously, we see within academia that anybody who professes to be a person of religion, they get laughed at. You know, what, you believe that, you know, that we came from God, that we came from Adam and Eve? What, you're telling me that you don't believe that we evolved over time? You know, their position within their universities and their position within their academic circles gets laughed at as though they are somewhat less. So this application of a foreign philosophy is dangerous, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to straddle across two philosophical approaches. One is the Islamic, which has its own philosophy, and one is this non-religious, in fact, you could go further, anti-religious methodology as well that is going. And we know, especially from the moral philosophers, that there has to be accepted that there's an incommensurability between two philosophical approaches. One philosophical approach has its own methodology, its own practice, its own rules, its own guidelines. Another one has its own. To start using this one to assess this one is incommensurable, not correct. Okay. So what is the doubters' methodology? What do they use? Okay. What are these people saying that are causing doubt with regards to Isa alayhi salam's return? Firstly, they're interpreting verses using how other verses are understood. So they will look at certain words within a verse. They will find that particular word within that verse. They will look for that word somewhere else in the Quran and say, ah, look, there you go. It means something different here, and it possibly means something different here. But the question arises, whose translations are they using? And this is a very literalistic, linguistic approach. Now we know, for those of us who've studied usul al-tafsir, and for those of us who've studied usul al-fiqh, we know that when we look at the lughat, there's a zahiri ma'na, then we look at, ibaratun nas, isharatun nas, and there's so many technical terms and methodology, and that's the word that I'm going to use now, hermeneutics, which is the science of how we understand words. And this science of how we understand words has been laid down to us and taught to us for centuries. So what are these people applying? These people who are causing doubt, what are they applying? They are applying what we call a Quranist hermeneutics or Quranism, meaning they only accept the Quran as a valid source for determining matters. Okay, they limit their explanations, they limit their understanding of a particular matter solely on the Quran. This is not traditional hermeneutics. We're going to explain what traditional hermeneutics is. This is not. And what it does is that it challenges religious authority. As we've already mentioned, it does not, if you cannot appeal to authority because it deems that to be a fallacy, so then completely religious authority is removed. And they oppose the hadith literature. Okay, they just base all their arguments on the Quran. There's no engagement in how matters were understood by the golden generation. Khairun nas qarni, thumma alladhina yalunhum, thumma alladhina yalunhum. The Prophet ﷺ has said that the best of people are those in my generation, then the generation that followed, and then the generation that followed after them. We know, the fuqaha know, the muhaddithun know, that these three generations, their understanding of the deen is second to none. Their understanding of the practical application of the deen is second to none. Their understanding of how the Quran should be applied, how the Prophet ﷺ understood situations is second to none. These are words of the Prophet ﷺ. But I'm using hadith. And somebody may say, yes, but what about the Quranic argument? If we're relying on hadith, should we not first challenge the Quranic argument? We will in time. And this is an innovative approach. Now, innovation in present day and age sounds nice. It sounds good. Oh, that's very innovative. You get a pat on the back if you do something at work and it's innovative. However, when it comes to aqidah, this is where the word bid'ah actually came from. It did not come from acts of fiqh. It came from beliefs. This is a very innovative approach. And we know kullu bid'ah dalala, that any act which is innovative is deviation, and deviation leads to the fire. So this is very dangerous. I'm just specifically at the moment focusing on the approach. This is about the doubters' methodology. We've not even got into the specifics of the result of this. So the question arises, what is their motivation? Why are people coming out on social media, on YouTube, on national TV, having their websites, causing doubt. Why are they saying, is Isa alayhi salam going to return? Why raise this? Well, firstly, let's just assume that they are innocent. Let's assume that there is no ill intent by them. When you apply a particular philosophical approach, as I've demonstrated to you, then the results are going to go in a certain way. If you cannot appeal to authority, if you are not going to go by what the Prophet ﷺ said, if you're just going to go directly and focus on the Quran, if you're going to have this very liberal, rational, literal understanding, then it's going to lead to a particular position, naturally. Okay, if your methodology is like this, then your answer is going to be X. If your methodology is like this, your answer is going to be Y. This is very important. That's why we have to be very careful that when we discuss certain things, that our methodology is correct. Even if we're using Islamic terms, don't forget, these people who are raising doubt are raising the doubt from the Quran. They're not bringing it from outside of Islam, they're bringing it from within Islam, because as soon as doubt is raised from from outside of Islam, then we naturally get defensive. It's that famous phrase, isn't it? That, when you see a wolf coming, then you take the necessary precautions. But when you see a wolf in sheep's clothing, then you may not necessarily take the necessary precautions, especially if you're a sheep. I guess if you're a human, you may still feel a bit paranoid and scared if you see a wolf coming towards you dressed like a sheep. That's quite, unsettling, unnerving. It gives free rein to intellect, the aql. Okay, and we saw that the types of groups that were drawn towards it were those who gave this greater significance to reasoning over revelation. And they are themselves confused, and they are confusing others. There is a hadith in Bab Kayfa Yuqbadul Ilm. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala brings it, in which he says, Inna Allah la yaqbadul ilm intiza'an. That Allah subhanahu will not take this knowledge, immediately, over a matter of seconds or days. It won't just happen, so quickly. Yantazi'uhu min al-ibad. Walakin, how? So it won't be extracted out of humans. Okay, so a person will have ilm and then the next day he wakes up and thinks, okay, how do I make wudu again? It won't work like that. وَلَكِنْ يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمِ بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. What's going to happen is this knowledge is going to be taken, that when the souls of ulama are taken, there is no alim of his quality or her quality coming after. So the knowledge will die with them. That's why, alhamdulillah, we have these seminars, we have these programs like that Balagh have and other institutes have, in order that we can inculcate this desire for this knowledge. And inshallah, there might be a budding scholar that's watching right now, that's engaged in this lesson, and 10 years from now, alhamdulillah, they are the ones who are spreading the deen. That's why it's so important that we continue to share. And that's why when you find a link to some dars, or you can sit in the company of a scholar or anything, then share that. Okay, share that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that this is the way. Hatta idha lam yubqi aliman, until no real scholar remains. Ittakhadha an-nasu ru'usan juhalan. So then people will be looking around, who shall we take as our leader? Who shall we ask questions from? And they will take the ignoramuses, they will take the ignorant people, and they will ask them. فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. So they will start giving fatwa without any knowledge. فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. So they themselves will be confused, and they will confuse others. So whoever these individuals are, let's assume there's no ill intention, then they think what they're doing is the right thing. But it's just because they've not had the traditional training. They've not been in the company of ulama, for not only their mind to be traditionally trained, but for their soul to be trained. Sometimes we focus too much on the mind. Okay, I've got a seminar after this dars in which we will be talking about the mental health and well-being. And what we do is we either just focus on the body. So we either just care, what do I look like? How strong am I? And we don't give any attention to the mind or the soul. Or we give all attention to the mind, and we want to be smart. We want to be clever. We want to be argumentative. We want to win arguments, whatever. And we give free rein to the mind. very rarely do we give that same attention to the soul. So not only does a scholar, or not only should a scholar be trained in the mind, but he should also be trained in his soul. This is very important, and we do not give that enough significance, but it's taking me off from today's topic, so I'm going to stop there, inshallah. If, however, if this was, if I look at this a bit more cynically, then it's probably because they themselves are set out in misguiding others. Okay, they want to change the deen. They want people to have a different understanding of the religion. They want people to sort of come towards them. They want to give the impression that because they're saying something that nobody else has said, people will listen to them. The old clickbait. They want to draw people. They want to attract people towards themselves. So it's one of the two. So let's dismiss first the doubters' methodology. They say Isa, the raising of Isa, or rather they say the descension of Isa is not mentioned explicitly in the Quran. That's an argument that they hold. And let's just focus on that key argument. They say that the descension of Isa is not mentioned clearly in the Quran. And then I guess by extension, they can say that the raising of Isa is not mentioned clearly in the Quran. So those two bullet points seem to be their main argument. But this is a problem because they are applying Quranist hermeneutics, Quranism. That's why they're coming to this conclusion. Because if they have an issue with this, then let me take this argument to its natural conclusion. Why is the Dajjal not mentioned in the Quran? Shall we now deny the Dajjal? Why is the Mahdi not mentioned in the Quran? Shall we now deny the Mahdi? Why is the Khilafah or the Khalif of the Prophet ﷺ not mentioned in the Quran? Should we deny the Khilafat of the Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anhum ajma'in? And furthermore, why aren't all the prophets mentioned in the Quran? There's only 20 odd or so that are mentioned in the Quran. And what about all the other books? What about all the other messengers? In fact, let's go further. Why is the number of prayers in the day and night not clearly mentioned in the Quran? Should we now abandon our salah? And also Hajj. Why isn't Hajj clarified in the Quran? Why isn't Zakah clarified in the Quran? Why are we giving 2.5%? Why don't we give 50%? Why don't we give 25%? The point that I'm making is that when you apply this methodology, it opens a door which can never be closed. And our ulama of the past dealt with this Quranism, bid'ah, this methodology that was used by people who said just use the Quran, and it is pushed across even in the modern world now. And this is particularly with those people with modernist thinking, because the Quran can be interpreted in certain ways, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So these are also points then which can be applied. And once we accept and raise this doubt based on Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, we can then say, right, if we apply that same methodology, we can apply it to virtually everything that makes us a Muslim. Okay, everything that makes us a Muslim. Appreciate the, mashallah, jazakallah khair, Muhammad. Certainly the most academic to our belief regarding Islam and Mubarak. Ameen. Any Q&A? Doesn't plausibility presume possibility? Would we argue that this issue has no possibility contrary but the evidence, as plausibility is an issue of what is more likely to all opinions? And yes, very good point, White Thread Institute. Plausibility does presume possibility, absolutely correct. And that is the argument that the people who espouse this view that there is no certainty with regards to the return of Isa alayhi salam. And when they posit this opinion, they dress it up as though it is an opinion and therefore it should be given due respect and due value as any other opinion. So their argument really is to establish plausibility. That's their argument. Their argument is to establish plausibility. Once they've established the doubt, once they put that plausibility inside our head that, okay, there are numerous opinions on this. We hear this all the time, don't we? Or, ulama, why can't ulama agree? They always have an opinion. Every alim has an opinion. So what they're trying to do is suggest that all opinions are equal. That's what they're trying to suggest. Okay. we will argue. Absolutely, we will argue. As yet, we've not got to our argument. So, inshallah, if I don't touch upon this argument, then please do pick me up on it. But I will get to our argument. I understand the Prophet was given the authority by Allah. We will get to that, inshallah, as well. Jazakum khair, ameen. Does it constitute kufr to be a Quranist? Okay, anonymous attendee. We will get to that as well, inshallah. I think that's all done. Now I can't get rid of this. There you go. Okay, and let's get rid of that. Okay, let's carry on. But for now, please just follow the train of thought. I always, I try to do what I call sort of breadcrumb teaching, which means that I don't give big da'wats, basically. No. It means basically that you can then follow the train of thinking, because it's important that our thinking is also aligned. When you make this argument to other people, your thinking needs to be aligned. So now let's go to sound Quranic methodology. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the Quran, مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ. So now we're going to go to the Quranist argument. Fair enough, let's be fair. Let's take the Quranists, let's take these people who are putting doubt and use what we both agree to be daleel. Okay, we both agree the Quran is daleel. We agree, as in the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and these with these modernist thoughts also agree that the Quran, because they are using the Quran to establish doubt. The Quran itself says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says, that whoever obeys the messenger, then indeed he has obeyed Allah. Now, some may argue that, yes, this was at the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And basically, this was to establish authority for the Prophet ﷺ among his companions, amongst the Arabs, because the Arabs also accepted Allah as the creator. They had accepted him. The difference was that they also ascribed other partners with Allah. So the Muslims, the new Muslim community, and the growing Muslim community, and the non-Muslim polytheists, both agreed that Allah was the Rabb. He was the creator. He was the Khaliq. So some will argue, yes, I know, but this is relevant to the time the Prophet ﷺ was alive. This becomes problematic because in that way, we now start to apply our thinking that the Quran is a historical text and it is defined and confined by time. That is a dangerous belief to have with regards to the Quran. The Quran is the revealed word of Allah, the uncreated word of Allah. And as a consequence, it applies then as it applies now. So how does it apply now if the Prophet ﷺ is not amongst us? It applies now based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And there's more evidence. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. That obey Allah and obey His Messenger. فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَيْ أَنْ تُصِيبُهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبُهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. So warn those who oppose His order, those who oppose His instructions, that will afflict them some tribulation or will afflict them a painful punishment. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ, we swear by your Rabb, they will not believe until yuhakkimuka, they bring you as the deciding factor in those things which they differ in. Subhanallah, you cannot find a more explicit ayah which talks about the current predicament that we are in with regards to the dissension of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, in which it says, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ. That they will not believe until they bring you as the deciding factor, or in our case, they bring the hadith. Okay, when they disagree amongst themselves, the Muslims are disagreeing amongst themselves, then they should not find any issue in them, مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ, in which you decree and decide, وَيُسَلِّمُ تَسْلِيمًا, and they accept. Okay, they accept. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. Again, another ayah, and then I have to do about 4 clicks before the next one comes up. There we go. And this also encompasses what we've just been speaking of. فَإِن تَنَزَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. If you disagree with some matter amongst yourselves, then return it to Allah and His Messenger if you are true believers and you believe in Allah and you believe in the last day. ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ, this is better, وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا, and the best of interpretations. So we take this argument to the Quranists who are only using the Quran to bring about doubt that Isa alayhi salam will not descend. And we say that why are you limiting yourselves to the Quran in order to establish this point? If you are in doubt, like we've seen in these ayah, and we can see from these verses that we should turn to hadith next. Why are you applying that methodology? And that goes back to that question, what is the motivation? If you can understand Arabic, then you can understand these verses. So why aren't you doing this? Either because you are confused and you are confusing others, or worse still, you know very well what you're doing and you're causing fitna with this. So it's one or the other. Either way, we should not follow people who are themselves confused and confusing others, and we should definitely not follow people who are causing a fitna. Arguably speaking, they're probably both the same. Anyway, moving on. What is the prophetic response to Quranism? Did the Prophet ﷺ encourage us just to rely on the Quran? Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah ta'ala mentions a narration, a marfu narration from Abu Rafi, which says, La alfayana ahadukum muttaqiyan ala arikatihi ya'tihi amrun mimma amartu bihi aw nahaytu anhu. That there will be people that will recline upon their couches, and a matter will come to them which with regards to I have ordered something with regards to it, or I have prohibited something regarding it, and he will say, La adri ma wajadna fi kitabillah. I don't know. La adri. I don't know. Is that what the Prophet said? I don't know. Ma wajadna fi kitabillah ittaba'nahu. We will only follow what we find in the Quran. We will only follow what we find in the Quran. And this is Abu Isa mentions this hadith, Hasan Sahih, Tirmizi has it in his Sunan. وعن الإرباد بن ساري رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أيحسب أحدكم متكئا على أريكته قد يظن أن الله لم يحرم شيئا إلا ما في هذا القرآن ألا وإني والله قد وعظت وأمرت ونهيت أن أشاء إنها لمثل القرآن أكثر. So he says, do one of you think whilst you're reclining on your couches that this is what you think, that Allah did not make haram something except that which is in this Quran? Allah, inni wallahi, for I swear by Allah that I have encouraged or adjoined or I have ordered or I have prohibited things which is equivalent to what you find in the Quran, if not more. And we have another narration. ما رواه أبو داود أيضا في سننه عن الإرباد بن ساري رضي الله عنه أنه قال صلى بنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم ثم أقبل علينا فوعظنا موعظة بليغة وفيها فعليكم بالسنة والسنة خلفاء المهديين الراشدين. So he stood, alayhi salatu wasalam, and he ordered us and he gave us a lecture, and it was a very profound lecture, and it was a very deep lecture, and it was a very to the heart lecture. In that lecture, he said, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالسُنَّةِ, it is binding upon you to follow my sunnah, وَالسُنَّةِ خُلَفَاءِ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ الرَّاشِدِينَ, and also follow the sunnah of the khulafa, rightly guided, correct, sound. تَمَسَّكُوا بِهَا وَعَدُّوا عَلَيْهَا بِالنَّوَاجِذِ, hold on to it, but grasp onto it with your molars. فِي كِتَابِ السُّنَّةِ مِنْ صَحِيحِ أَبِي دَاوُدَ. Now, this is another point which I want to make before we move on. And again, we could talk about this for hours, but I'm conscious of time. If you notice, the Prophet ﷺ describes his practice as sunnah. He says, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. Okay, now we all know that whenever we use the word sunnah, we know it's referring to the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. But what's interesting is that he also refers to the practice of the Khulafa Mahdiyin Rashidin also as sunnah. Okay, he mentions theirs, uses the word sunnah, which means that the khulafa will do things which I have not done. Because if it's only what the Prophet ﷺ has done, then it will be binding upon the khulafa also to follow the sunnah. It would be just said, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. But he said, وَسُنَّةِ khulafa, meaning their sunnah is going to be different than my sunnah. Now this is interesting, because some people use an argument that saying Umar, when he told everybody to gather together and pray behind one imam, he used the word bid'ah hasana. So people say, that means there's two types of bid'ah. There is good bid'ah and bad bid'ah. And this is misunderstood. All bid'ah is wrong. whenever something the Sayyidina Umar did, this was under his sunnah. When we saw Sayyidina Abu Bakr gathering together the Mus'haf, together, he gathered the Quran and into one Mus'haf, never been done in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That's because it was his sunnah. We saw, for example, him waging war against people who declared themselves to be Muslims, but they refused to give zakah. This caused a big point of debate and discussion amongst the companions. So, but anyway, I digress, because this is not about bid'ah in the sense of, yani, in fiqh sense. So I'm going to stop that there. I do have some videos on that on our YouTube channel, so please do search them, inshallah. I just wanted to make the point about what did the Prophet ﷺ say about the methodology of Quranism. What was the prophetic methodology? The Messenger ﷺ has confirmed the application of legal opinion when the need arises, as we see in this hadith from Sayyidina Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu, when the Prophet ﷺ sent him to Yemen, and he asked him, he says, كَيْفَ تَقْضِي إِذَا أَرَدَ لَكَ قَضَى? How are you going to decide on matters, Sayyidina Mu'adh, when an issue arises itself in front of you? Qala, he replied, so this is the Prophet ﷺ sending his student, and he wants to make sure that his student is going to continue the tradition, continue the prophetic tradition, and not innovate his own methodology. Otherwise, there was no need for him to do this test. He could have just said, okay, Sayyidina Mu'adh, off you go, deal with it accordingly. He wanted to make sure that Sayyidina Mu'adh, who carries out the methodology, which is the prophetic methodology. So he says, Qala aqdi bi kitabillah. He says, I will judge according to the book of Allah. Qala fa'in lam tajid fi kitabillah. Now, that's interesting on a number of points. Number of point first is that not all the ahkam are in the Quran. If all the ahkam were in the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ would never said fa'in lam tajid fi kitabillah. Why would he say fa'in lam tajid fi kitabillah? Because he says everything is in the Quran. Khalas, you don't need anything else. He said this because not all the ahkam are in the Quran. A bit of a rhyme there, wasn't it? Not all the ahkam are in the Quran. So fa'in lam tajid fi kitabillah, he's saying, we know that because there are finite number of verses, around 6,100 or so verses. And we know from the various fuqaha that when it comes to the ayats which are to do with ahkam, there's probably around 500, if that. So 500 verses, are they going to deal with all human behavior? Not really. So therefore, what are you going to do, O Mu'adh ibn Jabal? If you get an issue arises, you go to the book of Allah, you go to the Quran, and you can't find it. So he replies, he says, Qala fa bi sunnati Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I will apply the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu. So then he says to him, Qala fa in lam tajid fi sunnati Rasulillah wala fi kitabillah. So that shows also that even though the number of narrations are huge, relatively speaking, to the verses of the Quran, there's, I don't know, there's no one has actually said a specific number, but we know, for example, that Imam Muslim Ghaliban had memorized 300,000 narrations. Imam Bukhari, several 100,000. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, obviously some would have been the same, but we're talking about probably in the millions, I would say, of narrations attributed to the Prophet of different grades. And yet the Prophet ﷺ is still saying that it might be that you don't find it in there either. So he said, "Qala ajtahidu ra'yi wala alu." I will then apply my legal reasoning. Okay, I'm a faqih. Mu'adh ibn Jabal was a faqih. I will apply my legal reasoning. فَضَرَبَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So the Prophet ﷺ struck his chest. وَقَالَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي وَفَّقَ رَسُولَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ لِمَا يُرْضِي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. All praises are to Allah, who has given tawfiq to the messenger of Allah in that which pleases the messenger of Allah. Now I want to make a point that this narration is considered weak. However, it is sound according to some. Yani, it is a good level. And this has been accepted as sound in meaning and practice by fuqaha from the time of the tabi'een. Okay, I wanted to make that point. So let's look at the prophetic methodology applied. I will choose Imam Abu Hanifa. My training is in the Hanafi school. I have had training in the other madhahib, Shafi, Maliki, and Hanbali, but my predominant training has been in the Hanafi school. So I'm going to quote Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, in which he said, and look at the similarities between what Imam Abu Hanifa is saying and what Mu'adh ibn Jabal said to the Prophet ﷺ when he was questioned. He says, I take from the book of Allah. And if I do not find what I'm looking for, then from the sunnah of the messenger of Allah. Ignore the G. Then if I do not find it in either, I take a statement of a companion. I take from whichever I want, and I do not move away from their statement to the statement of others. So when the matter reaches to Ibrahim, Sha'bi ibn Sirin, Hassan, Ata, and Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, then there are people who performed ijtihad, and I perform ijtihad like they did. So you see the same methodology. The Quran, the Sunnah, the difference is obviously is Mu'adh ibn Jabal was a Sahabi, so he didn't feel the need to go to another Sahabi's statement, whereas Imam Abu Hanifa was a Tabi. So he felt the need because the Sahaba, the level of companionship is of a higher rank. As we said, Khairun Nasi Qarni, Thumma Alladhina Yalun, Thumma Alladhina Yalun. The word Thumma is obviously talking about a grade difference. And therefore, Qarni is giving you the high level. So Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, is not a proud man. He knows that the companions were given this great ni'mah in which they shared their life with the Prophet ﷺ. They ate with him, they traveled with him, they laughed with him, they cried with him, they went to battle with him. They literally are walking biographies of the Prophet ﷺ's life. So therefore, it makes sense to see what they have to say. And then obviously when he mentioned the Tabi'in, then he's saying, well, I'm of a similar rank, so I don't feel the need to go to them. And this is the reference for where that statement has been taken. So now we go to the question of how do we establish certainty. I'm just going to have a quick look on the questions. Can we share the evidence afterwards, please? Yes, we will be going through it. I'm not sure what that was relevant to, but we're going through it, inshallah. We'll return shortly, inshallah. Okay, that's good to know, Kamila. We look forward to seeing you back, inshallah. Okay, so let's just close this again. Right. How do we establish certainty? What are we doing? We've got about another half an hour or so. Okay, how are we establishing certainty? That's how we establish belief. Belief is based on certainty. Certainty brings about belief. Why the Quran? That's the first thing. Why are the Quranists using the Quran? Why not? If you're going to dismiss hadith, why not dismiss the Quran as well? Okay, why go to the Quran? Why not just use reasoning altogether? We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll say that there's some genuineness in them, that they genuinely want to understand what Allah is saying, and therefore, that's why they're using the Quran. Let's take that premise. The Quran is acceptable by all believers as the word of Allah. If you don't accept the Quran as the word of Allah, you're not a Muslim. So I guess that makes it easy, that nobody would accept their argument if they used arguments from outside of the Quran to deny the coming of Isa alayhi salam. People will say, oh, look at that. They're saying that, so-and-so is saying Isa is not going, so, let's not listen to them. So that's why every believer, no matter what his interpretation of Islam is, from, somebody who's on that end of the scale to somebody who's on that end of the scale, people who don't pray at all will still say, yeah, we believe the Quran is the word of Allah. Someone will try to add definitions to it and nuances to it and disclaimers, and you get all that full sort of scale going across from everywhere. It's time for Asr in our country. We will be off for prayer. Make dua for us, Abu Abdul, can't see the rest of your name. Make dua for us as well, whichever country you are in. And that shows, mashallah, the religion of Islam. Someone somewhere is praying to Allah, alhamdulillah. So let's click that back down. It is considered as tawatur. Now, tawatur is a term of which is of the highest and soundest epistemological value. You cannot get for a Muslim a higher form, a more sound form that has the highest epistemology as something which is tawatur. It is better than your senses, because your senses can be deceived. How do we establish tawatur? This is what we call mass transmission. Mass transmission is that a large, and the definitions of large is, because large is subjective. Large has been defined by muhaddithun especially, from different numbers, but it's just to say that there is a significant number of people have transferred a piece of data, a piece of information from one group to another group, and there's been no collaboration, there's been no joined up sameness between them. So for instance, there are 70 odd participants on this course. You are all listening to me. I'm pretty sure you're not all sat next to each other. You are dotted from all over the world. And I have said something. I've said a lot, but let's just say I've said one thing. Now, all 70 odd of you, go now and spread that word. For somebody to hear that, they will say, Mufti Amjad certainly said that, because such a large group of people are all saying the same thing, even though they did not collaborate. That, in terms of establishing truth with a capital T, that in terms of establishing certainty, that then by consequence establishing belief is the highest form of certainty. Okay, there are a large group of people that have not plotted together, that have not planned together, that have observed a phenomenon and then have gone and shared that phenomenon, explained it in a manner in exactly how they'd seen it, and there is unanimity, bar maybe the words that they've used, there is unanimity between them all 70 in different parts of the world, speaking different languages with different cultures, different walks of life, different sex, different ages, and different, academic qualifications, whatever. That's how we establish mass transmission. That's how the Quran has come to us. But the Quran requires a hermeneutical approach. Okay, hermeneutical approach is the lens by which we read the Quran. It is the lens. It is the method by which we read the Quran. Okay, let me explain to you. Some person said, "Oh, I can prove Trinity from the Quran." So everybody's like, "Hey, can you?" Yeah, I can prove Trinity from the Quran. And everybody's baffled, trying to remember all the verses. I don't know. He goes, and it's not even once. It happens so many times. There's Trinity within your own Quran, so many times. And you people speak that only Christians profess Trinity. You Muslims profess it as well. And the Muslims are saying, scratching their heads, scratching their beards. Do we? Yes, of course you do. 114 times, in fact. Everybody says, 114 times? Yeah. Bismi Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. There you go. Trinity. In the name of Allah, in the name of Rahman, in the name of Rahim. You've got three idols. So we all slap our foreheads all at the same time. And I say, no, that's not what that means. But can you see that depending on which hermeneutical lens you look at the Quran, how you can even establish something which the Quran came to challenge and eradicate? That's why you have to be very careful in which hermeneutical approach, in which lens you start to interpret the Quran. Next question. Is Quran the only tawatur source? Is it the only one? Is there nothing else which is tawatur? Ahadith, in fact, there are numerous ahadith which are of tawatur level, but it's not just limited to hadith. Ijma has reached to tawatur level. So this is important to understand. The argument that's given to us is that only the Quran is tawatur, only Quran is mass transmitted. No, it's not. Ahadith are also mass transmitted. And similarly, Ijma now has also been mass transmitted. That the consensus of the Muslims on a particular point, that there has been agreement, has been passed on from generation to generation. And this is what establishes certainty, which then establishes belief, because we establish belief on certainty, as our colleagues at White Thread Institute laid out to us in their Q&A, that surely we go by qat'i and we don't go by zanni and plausibility. And when we raise that first point, so this is where we were going to get to in terms of developing our thought. So what are what we consider primary sources? Okay, the Quran and the Hadith are primary sources. These both came from the mouth of the blessed mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. He would then say that this is Quran. For an onlooker, yes, the Prophet ﷺ may break into sweat. Yes, sometimes he would make a sort of a humming sound. Sometimes what he would do is he would need to lie down. So there was a physical effect on the Prophet ﷺ when revelation would come. But not all revelation came like that. Revelation also came to the Prophet ﷺ when he was asleep. Revelation came when Jibreel ﷺ came in the form of a man. It's only when it came to that salsalatul jarras, when it came in the noise of bells, or in another narration it mentions like the way you drag chain on rock, or the best description I give to my students is when you take your nails and pull it down a blackboard. You know that noise you get, and you go, oh, you kind of like cringe. Okay, it's so hard on the head. This was a type of revelation which the Prophet ﷺ found the most difficult. But there was other forms of revelation as well. Jibreel came in the form of a man and spoke to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ entered into not a conversation as such, but listening to him and then repeating the words as he was listening to them. So the Quran and Hadith, right? So there are mass transmitted narrations that have come to us. I don't know if you can still see me, or unless you need me to put the light on, if I've disappeared, my apologies. So now we're going to look at this on an usuli point. If you dismiss one form of tawatur, then in essence you are dismissing the concept of tawatur. And by dismissing the concept of tawatur, you are denying the Quran. Let me say that one again. If on an usuli level, you dismiss one form of tawatur, you say, okay, we're only going to take the Quran. And so someone says, yes, but why aren't you taking hadith? Or because we don't want to. You can't do that. Hadith is tawatur as well. Yeah, but we're not going to take that. Hold on a second here. So what is your argument? If your argument is that we're only taking tawatur, if your premise is rather that you're only taking tawatur because it's reliable, it establishes certainty, which then establishes belief, then you cannot choose which tawatur you take and which one you abandon. You have to take all the tawatur. Then that shows that your premise is wrong. Your hypothesis is not necessarily to determine the truth of something. You are seeking an answer. You already have the answer, and you're now building the case for that answer. So by dismissing one form of tawatur, then you are dismissing the concept, okay, of tawatur. And once you dismiss the concept of tawatur, you are also denying the Quran. We see a verse, just to make an argument, that إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَيُرِيدُونَ أَن يُفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَ اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَيَقُولُونَ نُؤْمِنُ بِبَعْضٍ وَنَكْفُرُ بِبَعْضٍ وَيُرِيدُونَ أَن يَتَّخِذُوا بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ سَبِيلًا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ حَقًّا وَأَعْتَدْنَا لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا. Now we know that the Jewish people and the Christians that came before the Prophet ﷺ declared prophethood. And when the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned to them that believe in me, I'm also a prophet in this long line of prophets that you have followed before. You accept Musa, you accept Yaqub, you accept Yusuf, you accept Yunus, you accept Ibrahim, you accept all these Anbiya. I'm also, Rasulullah ﷺ said, a Nabi of that lineage. So accept me as well. They said, no, we accept them, but we're going to deny you. We're going to deny you. We don't believe you're a prophet. And obviously they denied Isa alayhi salam. We know that the Jewish community of the time of Isa alayhi salam denied him as well, that he was a Nabi. They made all sorts of things up about him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says that if you start differentiating between believing in some Anbiya and not believing in other Anbiya, okay, then you are principally not believers. Because the same source, which is telling you that this person is a Nabi, is also now telling you that this person is a Nabi, but you're saying, no, we're going to stick with this person being a Nabi, but we're not going to take this person as being a Nabi. So that shows when you dismiss the concept, then you are denying in totality. So let's look at the Quran verses. And I'm conscious of time. We've got about 20 minutes or so left, and we have a few slides left. And these are the Quran verses which are used. إذ قال الله يا عيسى إن متوفيك ورافعك إلي ومطهرك من الذين كفروا وجاعل الذين تبعوك فوق الذين كفروا إلى يوم القيامة ثم إلي مرجعكم فأحكم بينكم فيما كنتم فيه تختلفون. So they will start to cause doubt. Yeah, but what does mutawaffi actually mean? And if you approach it with a sound mind, you can say, oh Isa, we will take your mutawaffika, take your soul and raise you towards us or towards me and purify you from those who disbelieved, and those who followed you, we will make them superior to those who denied you up until the day of judgment. And there are numerous other verses. Mal Masih ibn Maryam illa Rasul qad khalat min qabli rusul wa ummuhu siddiqa. So they will say, oh look, this means that he's going to die, because it says here that Isa Islam is a messenger, is nothing but a messenger, and many messengers have died before him. Oh, that means he's going to die. What kind of strange, methodology is this? Kana ya'kulani ta'am. Kana ya'kulani ta'am. They used to eat food. Oh, that means that, he's normal. He's a normal human. He's going to die. So they do these strange extrapolations from these verses. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Muhammad ﷺ was not but a messenger. Many messengers before him have died, which means obviously that Isa ﷺ came before Rasulullah, so he must have died. So they do these strange interpolations and extrapolations. And there's numerous other verses which you can look at in your own time. You can make a note of those verse numbers whilst I take a sip of a drink. My throat has been in pain for the last week. Okay, now let's look. Now that we've established about the acceptance of hadith, let's now look at them. By him in whose hand is my life, Isa ﷺ, the son of Maryam ﷺ, will soon descend among you as a just judge. He will break the cross, slay the swine, abolish the jizya. Wealth will flow to the extent that no one will accept it, and a single prostration will be better than the world and whatever it contains. This comes in all these are from either Bukhari or Muslim or both. I've not even taken hadith from any of the other tens or even hundreds of hadith books. By him in whose hand is my life, Isa ﷺ, the son of Maryam, will soon descend among you as a fair arbiter. He will break the cross, slay the swine, and abolish the jizya. Sturdy camels shall be abandoned and neglected. Spite, rancor, and mutual envy shall depart, and money will be offered, but none will take it. Sahih Muslim. There will never cease to be a group of my nation fighting upon the truth, being triumphant until the day of judgment. Isa ﷺ will descend, so their leader will say, come leaders in prayer. He will reply, no, some of you are leaders over others, as an honor Allah has granted to this nation. Again, Sahih Muslim. How will you be when the son of Mary descends among you and your ruler is from yourselves? Again, Bukhari, Muslim. About the hour, the Prophet ﷺ said, it will not come till you have seen 10 signs before it. Then he mentioned the smoke, the Dajjal, the beast, the rising of the sun from the west, the descent of Isa ﷺ, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the 3 earthquakes, one in the east, one in the west, and one in the Arabian Peninsula, and the last of which is a fire that will blaze from Yemen and drive people to the place of assembly. Okay, the Maidan Arafat, Muslim. The hour will not be established until the Romans descend upon Al-A'maq or the Biq, an army made up of the best of the people of the earth that day will set forth from Medina against them. When the prayer is being established, Isa ﷺ shall descend and lead them. When the enemy of Allah sees him, he will begin to dissolve as salt dissolves in water. If anything of him were to remain, he would continue to perish, but Allah SWT will slay him at the hand, obviously Isa ﷺ's hand, and he will show the Muslims his blood on his spear. So so now that I've narrated the hadith to you, I've shared the hadith to you, the muhaddithun will do what's called, I'm just going to put the light on because I'm sure I'm dissipating. The muhaddithun do something which is called hukm al-hadith, because each hadith has to have a hukm. Yani, what is the epistemological value of the hadith? Now, that's not saying, aliyadu billah, that sometimes the Prophet ﷺ said weak things, sometimes he said fair, sometimes he said hasan, and sometimes he said sahih. That's not. It's the actual isnad which can have problems in it, either because of the narrator or the man. So either it's the tahammul part, the person who is taking the narration, or is the ada, is when he passed it on to the next chain. So that's where it comes. So this is the hukm of the hadith. Numerous hadith experts declare the ahadith of the descension from the heavens of Isa ﷺ as tawatur. Okay. If that is contested, if someone says yes, but not all hadith experts declare, numerous do, then if that is contested, then the concept of descension from the heavens of Prophet Isa ﷺ has reached tawatur without any doubt. The secondary source, we're now reaching the end. So if you do have some questions, now would be the time to put them up. I can't stay too long for questions, people, because I need to get to the other side of Bradford. in order to lead mental health and well-being course, which is going to start in about an hour or so's time. And I need to pray Asr, I need to pray Maghrib, and I need to drive. Not all three at the same time, in some kind of consequential order. So do post your questions. So what I'll do is as soon as I finish, I will start taking your questions, because I think it's the last 2 slides now. So what about the secondary source, okay, which is Ijma? There has been consensus amongst the Ummah of the dissension from the heavens. Consensus. This has been incorporated within our Aqidah texts. Now, again, I say to you all 60 odd of you now, please study an Aqidah text with a reputable, renowned scholar. Not that I claim to be a reputable, renowned scholar, but I have done one on Aqidah Tahawiyah, which is available on YouTube somewhere. I'm not sure where. So even if you cannot sit live in a scholar's majlis, then at least watch the videos. It is important. It is more important than your fiqh. Okay, your Aqidah is more important than your fiqh. Because if you believe the wrong things, then can you, like, you know, this is, you're getting how important this is. Okay. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal has stated in his Usul Sunnah, to believe that the Dajjal will come forth and written on his forehead shall be the word kafir, as per the hadith that have come concerning it, and that Isa alayhi salam will descend and slay him at the gate of Lod. Oh, mashallah, perfect timing. Come in. Sorry, you can come in, the camera's on this side. I've got my delivery. Jazakumullah khairan. Mashallah. Nice cup of warm tea and a bit of chocolate cake. I'd share it with you, but I can't transfer it across. My apologies. Imam Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala wrote, we believe in the signs of the hour, like the emergence of the Dajjal and the descent of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So we believe, okay. Imam Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, who wrote under the 42nd point of Ijma, or scholarly consensus, there is Ijma about the Prophet's dissension alayhi salatu wasalam for the major sinners. There is Ijma about the Prophet's intercession. I've got ascension in my mind now, or maybe it's the chocolate cake and tea that's putting me off. Or there is Ijma about the Prophet's intercession alayhi salatu wasalam for the major sinners, after which now I can't even speak English, after which he said, and likewise what is reported about the Dajjal and the descent of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam and his killing him, yani the killing of the Dajjal by Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And now other faiths. Now I've only just put this as an addendum, okay, as an addendum. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, وَحَدِّثُوا عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا حَرَجٍ, that on matters in which the Ahli Kitab, the Jewish or the Christian community, on a matter that they speak that is not against what you are saying or against Islamic Aqidah or our beliefs, then there is no harm in mentioning those. And we saw what we call Israeli riwayat. Many A'immah have used them. Some obviously have chosen ones which probably weren't good ones to choose, but they have quoted Bani Israel. The Prophet gave ijazah to quote. So that's the only reason why I'm mentioning this. And this is the last slide. Judaism, obviously, they did not accept Isa alayhi salatu wasalam as being Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, as the Messiah. They claimed he was the false Messiah. And their reason for their aqidah as to why they think he's the false Messiah is because he did not fulfill what the Messiah, the Masih, is going to do. They're saying the Masih is going to build the third temple, that he's going to gather all the Jews back to the land of Israel, that there will be world peace and all hatred, oppression, disease, and suffering will end. There will be the spread of universal knowledge of God and unite humanity as one. Now, if we ignore the third temple part and we ignore gather all Jews back to the land of Israel, and if we look at the rest of it, world peace, end all hatred, oppression, then we see that this is not too dissimilar to the hadith that were mentioned, that Isa alayhi salam will do that. Now, Isa alayhi salam would bring peace, that there will be no hatred, there'll be no envy, there'll be no suffering, there'll be nobody that you need to give zakah, sadaqah to, and people will all unite. So they said, well, Isa alayhi salam didn't do that. He died on the cross, according to the Jewish view. So he can't be Isa, he can't be the Messiah. However, what our argument to them would be is that Isa alayhi salam was never going to do that when he came the first time. He's going to do that when he comes the second time. That's when he's going to do it. So again, if Judaism ignore the point that they didn't think, because if we ignore what the Jewish community is saying with regards to what he did the first time around, the second part does tie in with what he will do the second time around. In terms of Christianity, they refer to it as the second advent or the parousia. In the New Testament, there is the mention of Epiphania, which is a return of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. In the Nicene Creed, they say he ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in his glory to judge the living and the dead. Catholics add that the Antichrist will precede the second coming. So you can see that there seems to be some agreement, if we interpret the Jewish statement as I told you how to interpret it, that Isa alayhi salam will return. Conclusion, and everybody wants a conclusion. So this is the best conclusion that I'm going to give you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it's the best I'm going to give you. And that is that the statement of the denial of the descension from the heavens of the Prophet ﷺ is kufr. Anybody who makes that statement, anybody who denies it, then they have made a statement of kufr. Okay? As I said, I'm not going to make takfir of individuals. I'm not going to make takfir of groups. I will make that statement, and you will take that statement, and then it can be understood. So please do be wary of what is being spread. Share what you have learned today. I know Balagh did say to me that they will be making short video clips of this and maybe sharing it through some medium. I don't know if that is the case. Mufti Abrar and I, when we spoke last week or the week before, he did mention it. Sorry, a couple of weeks ago, because this was supposed to run last week. So inshallah, hopefully that will happen. I'm just going to look at some of the chats. Okay. What time does this for talk finish? That's the videos. I appreciate it. We'll return shortly. It is time for us to prayer. Abolish the jizya tax means which tax is this? Is zakat from the no jizya. Jizya is a payment which is paid when Muslims are in a majority, and like we have tax now, then there is a form of tax that non-Muslims pay. So that's what it is. Zakat is not considered as a tax. Zakat is a form of worship. And because it's a form of worship, we cannot consider it to be a tax. And mashallah, I'm booked onto that talk too, mental health. Mashallah, Nafisa, alhamdulillah. You're busy today. Would that mental health talk be broadcasted on Zoom? No, that is not going to be broadcast on Zoom. It might appear sometime on Iqra TV, but I don't know if that is the case. What will be Prophet Islam's main mission as he returns for the second time? We mentioned there, Joseph, that he will primarily come to kill the Dajjal. He will live a normal life. That's his real purpose, and he will come at a time to establish peace upon the earth and establish serenity. But he will not come in the office of prophethood. He will come to be a follower of the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ. What lessons should we as Muslims retain as lessons from his second coming? The lessons we should learn is really, if you are watching or you are a student on the end of the world course, you will know it's considered as one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment. So if we are around, it is going to be a very difficult time, Joseph. The reason I say that is because unfortunately, many people will either be supporting the Prophet Isa alayhi salam and Imam Mahdi, or they will be going against him. And I put up on my WhatsApp status when I was preparing the slides that many people say that, oh, if the Dajjal has got kafara on his forehead, then everybody can see that. Why would anybody follow him? So I put there that it says smoking kills on cigarette boxes, but people still smoke. And it also says, the doctor and the GP will tell you don't eat fried food or don't eat too much fried food. We still eat fried food. So there's many things which we're told is not good for us, and we still do it because our nafs gets the better of us. So in the same way, that will happen as well. Why are there many disagreements among the Islamic scholars today? There isn't many disagreements, Abdullahi, amongst the Islamic scholars, those who are traditionally trained. There isn't. Trust me, I sit with many scholars, alhamdulillah, and there's a very little disagreement. Yes, on some little fiqh issue here and there, but generally speaking, we get on very well. But those people who want to push a particular agenda, that's a different thing altogether. Are you interested in the origins of Western civilization? Okay, that's another course. Okay, very good. Jews want to build a third temple in the site of Al-Aqsa. I was waiting for this to come up. Is it possible for the Jews to destroy us with the way they are slowly trying to rotate the land surrounding Al-Aqsa? It's hard for me to say as to what the Jewish community are planning, what they're not planning. I think we need to make sure that we support Aqsa. I traveled to Aqsa a couple of months ago, so I would suggest those of you who can travel should try to travel. I know some countries don't have, like the Pakistani government has no, doesn't recognize the Israeli government, so obviously people can't get visas to go. But where you can go, you get a chance to walk in the place where Anbiya walked. It raises awareness. The people know that the Ummah has not forgotten Masjid al-Aqsa. So it's important. I would say focus on the positives like that. Prophet Isa will get married once returning and also rule for some. Yes, he will. Once he returns, he will live, as we say, as a normal life. What about Aqiqatul Wasatiyya? What do you mean? What about it? It's apologies, I had to take a break for us, so I'm not sure if I missed this. Do we have any knowledge on what Isa is currently doing while ascending the heavens? Do we know which level of heaven? Well, we've seen obviously the time when Nabi Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went on the Mi'raj and he saw Isa Alayhi Salam on his way up with his, it mentions cousin or uncle, Yani Yahya Alayhi Salatu Wasalam. And there's no, we cannot say when we're talking about certainty and belief that we cannot say for certain what Isa Alayhi Salam do. There's no particular source that we have. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they will particularly, that we're going to deliver that Anas in the end of the world course. So I'm not going to answer it here, so that you attend that course if you're not done already. Confusions in religion will be cleared by Isa Islam or Mahdi. Well, there will be clarity once Imam Mahdi becomes out and calls people to follow him. Then you will see some will follow, some won't. They will be around at the same time at some point. Absolutely, yes. Thank you for your time. Barakallahu feekum. Will Islam bring a new fiqh mazhab, as I assume will have been taught by Allah in the heavens prior to coming down and clever? Not as such, no. I don't know specifically which madhab he will follow. So it's hard for me to say. But I won't say that he's being taught by Allah, because taught by Allah is revelation, and the fiqh aspects of it were those Sunnaic practices that the Prophet did. So fiqh has come from Quran, Hadith, and Qiyas. So I don't know which madhab he will follow. When Isa, and if he comes in our lifetime, do you suggest we migrate where he is, or will peace spread everywhere? Eventually, I guess peace will spread everywhere. But it's going to be great difficulty beforehand. I met somebody in the gym the other day, and he said, Musab, there's a lot of issues going on in Europe with the LGBT issue, with this matter, the other matter. Do you say we should be making hijrah? And I said, well, let me tell you this. If you don't have scholarship in your house, then your iman is you should be in fear of your iman. Simple as that. Will your iman be more protected in a Muslim majority country? I don't know, because I don't live in a Muslim majority country, so I can't say. But will it be safer? I think I could say that. Okay. Jazakallah khair for another informative session. May Allah preserve you and continue to allow you to share His knowledge with us and keep us on the straight path. Ameen. Fantastic du'as. Sister Nancy, what will ordinary people like ourselves be doing, like ourselves during the time of Isa Islam? Well, hopefully we will be Ahlul Haqq. We will be the people of the truth. The Jewish community, the Christian community, the Muslim community have different opinions with regards to Isa Islam. The Muslim community have got a certain view upon Isa Islam. The Jewish community have a different view. The Christian community. So all that will prevail. And inshallah, we, with the rightly guided ulama and the organizations which continue to provide this learning, we can benefit. Where's it gone? Sorry. Heard that the Dajjal will live 40 days and Isa will live 40 years, might live and they is this right? No, the Dajjal, I said, I suggest Nafisa, since you're attending every other course that I'm delivering, you need to attend the end of days course, end of the world, because I discussed that in great detail. This was specifically about Isa alayhi salam and clarifying those who are raising doubts. I had a very specific brief for this. Will Salafis bring the all unite when Isa alayhi salam comes? Inshallah is one. How about that? How about that? Related to kufr. Just want to, where's it gone? Related to kufr. Just want to know, for the group that only holds upon Al-Quran regardless and without Sunnah and not the Hadith or Mutawatir, what is their position as Muslim Islam? It depends on their beliefs. If they say, Zakia, if they say anything of their beliefs which go outside of the traditional held beliefs, then they will be considered as no. If they deny the Prophet ﷺ, if they deny his verses, his Hadith, then it is seriously problematic. Jazakumullah khairan, Ustad, very informative. Barakallahu feekum. If Jews build a third temple, would it actually hasten the coming in the Dajjal and eventually? All this is timed by Allah. Nothing happens, remember, without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hukam. Everything has been planned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has planned all this, so that's all in place. So don't worry. Jazakumullah, mashallah, first time attending and you have a good sense of humor, learn new things. Alhamdulillah, that's good. Jazakumullah khairan. Okay, that's that. So that's all them there. Let's see if there's anything on the, can we share? We've done that. What does it mean to slay the swine? It means that the consumption of, now, do we take this literally in a literal sense? That will he literally go around killing all the swine? It doesn't seem probable, does it? How will he kill every single swine? He would have to travel the whole earth. So it will, if we take this in a majazi sense, he might kill all the swine, Allahu alam. But it seems more likely that if we take the majazi sense, that he will destroy the concept of eating swine. Jews want to build a third temple. I've answered that on the other one. Will Islam bring a new fiqh? I've answered that on the other one. Does tawatur al-ma'na have the same hukum as tawatur al-lafz? Yes. Is qati hukum due to tawatur al-ma'na or the ijma? If ijma, then is ijma al-sahaba or ulama? This ijma is upon the ulama ijma. This has been established since then. Related to kufr, okay, that's been answered already. So that, I think, is all done, my dear brothers and sisters, and only 2 minutes we went over. Alhamdulillah. Okay, a couple of more come on the chat. How do we get to know about further topics? I'm assuming that you may have shared your email with Balagh. So if you shared your email with Balagh, then they will be sending out links to you. But if you follow people on social media, not found from a group, zero found from a group, I don't know what that means. If you follow on social media, I have a social media presence. Balagh has a social media presence. So if you follow there, you will get all of that. Assalamu alaikum. Where is it gone? Jazakumullah khair. Will this PowerPoint be uploaded onto Balagh portal as per usual? I like the way you implied in your answer, in your question, that it should be. I don't know. Let me think about it. They've not asked me for it, so let's see if I can get away with it. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. When Isa comes back, he will explain to the Christians that I am not God and to the Jews that I am the Messiah. Yes, Jesus alayhi salam is a Muslim who follows the religion of Islam, his knowledge of the Last Testament, which is the Quran. Jesus will give dawah to all human beings to accept Islam and rule by the laws of Allah. And Islam will be originated. It's absolutely correct, Muhammad. Absolutely correct. Jazakumullah khair, Ustad. Always get a lot of knowledge and wisdom from your class. Alhamdulillah. Keep making dua, Mahdi. Mahdi? Oh no. Okay. Is there something in your name that we need to be concerned about? Do you have any sons? How do we get to know about further topics? I've answered that one. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yep, zero found from the group. What books? Hool. What books? Hool. No found from a group. I don't know what that means. Should we read to strengthen our iman? Yes, of course. Study. Studying is the main thing which will strengthen your iman. The more you know about your religion, the more your iman will get stronger. How do the teachers do their prayers when a lesson overlaps with a prayer time? Out of curiosity, it doesn't. My asr is, I got to show you proof. It's 15:34 here in England, and Maghrib does not start till 4:10. So I have 50 minutes, so they don't cross over. They plan it well. Good question. Inshallah, I will check it out. Jazakallah. She means what books? With regard, what books do you want to study? 11:34. MashaAllah. Look at that. People in Malaysia, look at this is sacrifice. This is Qurbani, 1134 in Malaysia, and people are studying. May Allah bless the Malaysians. Ameen. What books? You need to, it's probably better to study with teachers, with ulama, rather than just going to books directly. And Singaporeans, okay, alhamdulillah. I mean, may Allah bless all those in Southeast Asia who are, but the thing is, Dr. Faisal and Rizwan, you people have nice warm weather. So I know, we should be making more dua for us, because we are always cold here and it's always raining here. I think maybe the next Balagh I need to deliver in Singapore or in Malaysia. I think so. I think that's the next one. Raining here, monsoon. Okay, no, I'm happy in Bradford then. Yes, please, inshallah. Excellent, excellent. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. If there's no more questions, then I will allow you to go, and I will enjoy my chocolate cake and my nice cup of tea that my dear wife brought for me. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Barakallahu feekum, all of you. May Allah bless you all. May Allah, there you go. Sheikh Umar studio in Malaysia before. Sheikh is coming next week. Alhamdulillah. Well, just slot me in, Zakiya. Just slot me in. Find me a space and slot me in. Inshallah, I hope Allah blesses you all. May you grant you tawfiq for developing further ilm. And inshallah, join some of the other courses that I'm delivering, or the other ulama are delivering. The ulama do take a lot of their, valuable time to do this, so take benefit from them. May Allah keep your iman protected, and may we see you all again in the future. Ameen. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.